She was standing in the doorway with one suitcase. One. That is all she packed for a life she had spent 12 years building. One suitcase. Not 5. Not one for each daughter she was about to walk away from. Just one. For herself. Her husband was on his knees. Not because he was weak, because he had grabbed her ankle as she tried to step past him, and she had kicked his hand away like he was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. He looked up at her from the floor, flour still dusted across his forearms, his eyes red, his voice cracking, and he said the only words he could find, "Nadine, please. Whatever this is, we can fix it. Just tell me what you need. I will find a way." She looked down at him. This man she had married at 19, this man who woke before the sun every single day to bake bread so his family could eat. This man who had given her 5 daughters, a home, and every ounce of love his body could hold. She looked at him kneeling on that old hardwood floor, and her lip curled. Not with anger, with something worse, pity. "You have got flour on your face, Roscoe. You always have flour on your face. That is all you will ever be. A man covered in flour." Then she stepped over him. She walked down those stairs. 5 little girls were standing in that hallway. The oldest was 12. The youngest was 4. The 4-year-old reached out and grabbed the hem of her mother's dress with both hands, holding on with everything her little body had. "Mama, where are you going? Mama, pick me up. Mama." Nadine looked down at those tiny hands gripping her dress, and she pulled the fabric free. She did not kneel. She did not kiss that child's forehead. She did not say, "I love you," or "I will be back," or even goodbye. She pulled her dress from her daughter's fingers the way you pull a napkin off a table, and she walked out the front door. A black sedan was idling at the end of the gravel driveway, a car none of them had ever seen before. She walked toward it without looking back, and those 5 little girls, barefoot, still in their pajamas, ran after her. They ran down that gravel driveway, sharp stones cutting into the soft bottoms of their feet, screaming her name into the October air. "Mama, Mama, come back. Mama, please." She got in that car. She closed the door, and the car pulled away. It turned onto the county road, and it disappeared around the bend. She never rolled down the window. Now, what those 5 daughters did when she came crawling back 25 years later, broken, sick, and begging for forgiveness, that is something nobody in that small mountain town has ever forgotten. And I promise you, by the time this story is over, you will not forget it either. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. The stories we tell here are not just stories. They are life lessons wrapped in emotion. They will make you think, they will make you feel, and they will stay with you long after the video ends. And if you are already part of this family, drop a like right now. It takes 1 second, and it means the world. Now, let me take you back to where this whole thing started. This story comes from a place called Elk Hollow, Virginia, a small town tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the kind of place most people drive through without stopping. Population 800 on a good year, maybe 700, and change when the young ones left for the cities looking for something bigger. The kind of place where the post office doubled as the general store, where Friday night football was the closest thing to religion besides church on Sunday, and where people measured a man not by the car in his driveway or the watch on his wrist, but by one simple question: does he show up? Roscoe Linden showed up. Every single day of his life. He was a baker. 3rd generation. His grandfather, a man named Walter Linden, built the original brick oven in 1942 with his own hands, mixing the mortar himself, laying each brick like he was building a cathedral. His father kept that oven burning for 30 years, until the day his heart gave out at 61. They found him face down on the work table, hands still in the dough, as if even death could not stop him mid-knead. Roscoe was 19 years old when he took over. He did not have a choice, and he did not want one. That bakery was not a business to him. It was a birthright. It was a promise. It was the thing that made the Lindens who they were in Elk Hollow. The bakery sat on the corner of Main and Maple, a squat brick building with a tin roof, and a hand-painted sign out front that read Lindens in faded blue letters. Roscoe repainted that sign himself every couple of years, and every version came out a little more crooked than the last, but nobody in town minded. They loved that crooked sign. It was honest, just like the man who painted it. What did Roscoe make? Bread. That was it. Sourdough and rye, wheat loaves and honey oat, the occasional cinnamon roll on Saturdays. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would make a food critic drive 3 hours from Richmond. But every loaf that came out of that old brick oven came out like a handshake. Golden, warm, solid, dependable. It was the bread El Calo ate at every kitchen table, every funeral reception, every wedding, every church potluck. It was the bread of their lives, and Roscoe made it the same way every day, with the same care, the same patience, the same scarred and calloused hands that had been shaped by decades of heat and dough and devotion. Did it make him wealthy? No, not even close. Some weeks he had to choose between fixing the oven's cracked chimney liner and buying new shoes for the girls. Some months the flour bill swallowed everything, and he would stand at the kitchen counter at home, staring at a stack of envelopes he could not open because he already knew what was inside. There were nights, more than he would ever admit to anyone, when Roscoe scraped the last of the stew into 5 small bowls, told his daughters he had already eaten, and went to bed with his stomach folding in on itself like a fist. But those girls were fed. They were warm. The old farmhouse at the edge of town leaked in 3 places and the porch steps groaned like an old man getting out of a chair, but it was theirs. Paid off, land and all, 3 generations deep. And every morning at 3 o'clock, while the rest of El Calo was still sleeping, Roscoe Linden would rise in the dark, pull on his boots, walk to that bakery, light the oven, and begin again. He thought that was enough. For a long time, Nadine thought so too. They met at 17. Same town, same church, same back pew at El Calo Baptist. Reverend Tate was the kind of preacher who believed every sermon needed to be at least an hour long, and his favorite word was brethren. He used it so often it became a running joke among the teenagers forced to sit through his services. One Sunday, Nadine leaned over and slid a folded piece of notebook paper onto Roscoe's knee. He opened it under the hymnal. It read, "If he says brethren one more time, I am walking out of here, and I do not care if my mother drags me back by my hair." Roscoe laughed so hard his mother reached over and pinched his arm hard enough to leave a mark. But he did not care. He looked at the girl sitting next to him, dark hair catching the light from the stained glass window, a grin on her face that was half mischief and half dare, and something in his chest clicked into place like a key finding a lock it had been searching for its whole life. They were inseparable after that. Through the rest of high school, through summer nights catching fireflies in mason jars, through drives down mountain roads with the windows down and the radio up, Nadine was beautiful in the way mountain girls sometimes are. Hair dark as creek water at midnight, a laugh that could fill any room, eyes that held a restlessness Roscoe mistook for curiosity. He loved that about her. He thought it meant she was alive, awake, hungry for experience. He did not understand yet that restlessness and contentment cannot live in the same body forever. Eventually, one of them has to win. In the beginning, contentment won. Nadine would wake at 3 in the morning with Roscoe, walk with him to the bakery in the dark, sit on the flour-dusted counter in her nightgown, bare feet swinging above the floor, and watch him work. She would watch his hands move through the dough, kneading, folding, shaping, and she said once that it was like watching someone pray. "Roscoe," she said, leaning back against the wall, her voice soft in the lamplight, "I do not need the world. You know that, right?" He looked up from the dough, flour on his nose, and smiled. "What do you need then?" "Just this. Just you, and this bread, and this mountain. That is all I will ever need." He believed her. Why would he not? She said it the way people say things they mean with their whole body. She said it like gospel. They married at 19. Small ceremony at the Baptist church. Reverend Tate officiated. And yes, he said brethren at least 14 times. Nadine caught Roscoe's eye during the vows and mouthed the word, and he nearly laughed at his own wedding. The babies came fast. 5 daughters in 8 years. The way they sometimes do in small towns where the nights are long and quiet and there is not much else to fill them. Pearl came first. She was serious from the moment she opened her eyes, like she had been born already understanding that the world was a complicated place and someone needed to keep track of things. By 5, she was organizing her sisters like a tiny general. By 8, she was helping Roscoe with the books at the bakery, adding up numbers with a pencil stub and frowning at the results. Then came Ruby. If Pearl was stillness, Ruby was motion. She never walked when she could run, never whispered when she could shout. She drew pictures constantly, filling notebook after notebook with wild, colorful images of the family, the bakery, the mountains. She had a temper that flared hot and fast, but underneath it was a fierce, burning loyalty to the people she loved. Opal was the quiet one. She lived somewhere inside herself, a place nobody else could reach. She would sit for hours watching light move across a wall, or stare at the creek behind the house as if it were telling her a story only she could hear. Roscoe worried about her sometimes, but he also understood her. Some people are just built for silence. Iris had her mother's laugh. That same full room-filling sound that made everyone around her smile whether they wanted to or not. She was the emotional center of the family, the one who knew when someone was sad before they knew it themselves, the one who would crawl into your lap and just sit there, not saying anything, just being present until you felt better. And then there was Violet, the baby, the last. She had Roscoe's eyes, brown and deep and endlessly kind, and from the moment she could walk, she followed him everywhere. To the bakery, to the garden, to the hardware store. Wherever Roscoe went, there was Violet, 3 steps behind, watching everything he did as if she were memorizing it for later. 5 daughters, 5 reasons to keep that oven burning. Roscoe loved those girls the way gravity loves the earth. Completely, instinctively, because there was no other direction to go. He braided hair before school, learned to sew buttons because he could not afford a seamstress, sat cross-legged at a plastic table built for dolls and attended tea parties with stuffed animals, and he never once, not a single time, complained. After 14-hour days at the bakery, he would come home smelling like yeast and wood smoke and flour, and those 5 girls would crash into him at the front door like a wave hitting a shore. He would drop to his knees and gather as many of them as his arms could hold, and for a moment, just a moment, the tiredness would disappear and everything in the world was exactly where it was supposed to be. He was not a perfect man. He was something much harder to be. He was a present one. And in this story, that is everything. But while Roscoe was building a life with what he had, something inside Nadine was starting to crack. Not all at once. Not with a dramatic snap that everyone could hear. It was slow, silent, like a hairline fracture in a foundation wall that you do not notice until the whole house starts to lean. It started with the screen of her phone. Just scrolling, just looking. Women her age, women she had gone to school with, women who had left Elk Hollow for cities with skyline views and lives that sparkled. She would see their photos, the vacations, the handbags, the restaurants with cloth napkins and candles on every table. She would see their husbands or their men, tall, polished, standing beside cars that gleamed like they had never known a dirt road. And then she would look up, at the kitchen with its peeling linoleum, at the stove where one burner refused to light no matter how many times Roscoe tried to fix it, at the pile of mending that never seemed to get smaller, at her own reflection in the window above the sink, 34 years old, dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same flannel shirt she had worn yesterday and the day before, and something inside her chest would tighten like a rope being pulled from both ends. She did not name it at first. She just felt it. A low hum of dissatisfaction that grew louder every day. A voice that whispered, "This is not what you were meant for." The grocery store was where it broke open. She was in the canned goods aisle, doing the math in her head the way she always did, putting things back on the shelf when the numbers did not work, when she heard a voice behind her. "Oh my goodness, Nadine, is that you?" She turned. A woman was standing there in heels and a dress that probably cost more than Nadine spent on groceries in a month. Hair done, nails done, gold bracelet catching the fluorescent light. It took Nadine a moment to place her. Darlene Watkins. They had been in the same homeroom in 10th grade. Darlene looked her over slowly. The faded dress, the worn shoes, the cart with its careful selection of off-brand items. And then she smiled. That particular smile that does not reach the eyes but reaches everything else. The kind of smile that is not a greeting. It is a verdict. "Well, bless your heart, honey. You look like you have been busy." 4 words. Bless your heart, honey. Anyone from the South knows that those words can mean 100 different things, and almost none of them are kind. They landed in Nadine's chest like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples spread outward into every corner of her life. She drove home that day and sat in the car for 20 minutes before going inside. When she finally walked through the door, Ruby came running up to show her a drawing. "Mama, look, I drew all of us in front of the bakery. See, that is you, and that is Daddy, and that is—" "Not now, Ruby." "But Mama, I worked really hard on—" "I said not now." The sharpness in her voice stopped Ruby mid-sentence. The girl looked at her mother, then down at her drawing, then back at her mother. She folded the paper carefully, walked to her room, put it in a box under her bed, and she never showed her mother another piece of art again. That was the first cut. There would be many more. Nadine started coming home different. Shorter with the children, colder with Roscoe. She would snap over nothing. A dish left in the sink, a toy on the stairs, the sound of the girls laughing too loudly. Things that used to make her smile now made her jaw tighten. With Roscoe, she was something else entirely. She started picking at him the way you pick at a wound that is not healed. Not to fix it, because the pain felt like something, and something was better than the numbness. Why cannot you do more than bread, Roscoe? Why is this all you are? He would look at her, confused, hurt, trying to understand what had changed. I am building something, Nadine. It is slow, but it is solid. Good things take time. Just a little more patience. Patience. She repeated the word like it tasted rotten in her mouth. I have been patient for 12 years. 12 years of watching you come home covered in flour, smelling like an oven, making just enough to not quite get by. I am tired, Roscoe. I am so tired of being patient. What do you want me to do? Tell me, and I will do it. I want you to be more. Can you do that? Can you just be more? He did not know what more meant. He did not know that more had already found her, and that more had a name. Now, I need to tell you about someone. A woman named Francine Delacroix. She and Nadine went to high school together. Back then, they were equals. Same neighborhood, same thrift store dresses, same dreams, spoken in whispers at sleepovers about what life would be like when they finally got out of El Calo. But life took them in very different directions. Francine figured out early that certain men in certain cities would pay very well for her company, her beauty, her ability to make them feel important. She did not call it what other people called it. She called it networking. By 40, she had a condo in the city, a closet full of designer clothes, a car that cost more than most people's houses, and a contact list that read like a who's who of wealthy men across 3 states. One afternoon, Francine was passing through El Calo on her way to somewhere more interesting when she spotted a familiar face at the farmer's market. Nadine was standing behind a folding table, selling vegetables. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, all grown in the garden behind the farmhouse. Honest work, good work. Francine walked over, heels clicking on the pavement, sunglasses perched on top of her head like a crown. Nadine. My goodness, girl. Is that really you? Nadine looked up. It took her a moment. Then recognition, and with it, a hot flush of something that lived right between shame and longing. Francine. Wow. It has been years. Francine looked at the table. The tomatoes in their little baskets, the handwritten price signs, the mason jar for collecting cash. She looked at Nadine's hands, dirt under the fingernails, calluses on the palms. She looked at the simple cotton dress, the flat shoes, the hair pulled back in a practical bun. This is what you are doing now. Selling tomatoes. She said it gently, almost kindly, and that made it so much worse. It is just extra income, Nadine said quickly. Roscoe has the bakery, and I help out with the garden, and the girls are. Francine held up a hand and reached into her bag. She pulled out a business card. Thick stock, embossed lettering, gold trim. She held it out between 2 manicured fingers. I am having a little gathering this weekend. Very exclusive. Beautiful hotel, important people. Men who could change your entire situation with a single phone call. She leaned closer. Her perfume was something floral and expensive, the kind of scent that Nadine had only ever smelled in magazine samples. Do not you want more than this, Nadine? Look at you. You are beautiful. You are smart. Do not you want to stop counting pennies and start living? That question detonated something that had been building in Nadine for years. It blew past every defense she had built, every gratitude she had taught herself to feel, every moment she had told herself that what she had was enough. She heard herself say the word before she even decided to say it. Okay, I will come. And with that single word, the fuse was lit. The gathering was not in a conference room with name tags and fruit trays. It was in a penthouse suite on the 14th floor of a luxury hotel in the city. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like frozen rain. Champagne in flutes so thin they looked like they would shatter if you held them too tight. Men in suits that cost more than Roscoe made in 6 months, standing in clusters, talking about deals and acquisitions and portfolios. Women in designer dresses that moved through the room like silk and shadow, laughing at the right moments, touching arms at the right moments, making every man in their orbit feel like the center of the universe. Nadine had never been in a room like this. The air itself felt different. It smelled like money. Not literally, but that is the only way to describe it. Like possibility, like power, like a door opening to a room she had been standing outside of her entire life. Francine appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Relax, honey. You look like you have never seen a chandelier before." "I have not. Not like this." Francine smiled. "Well, get used to it." That is when she saw him. Or rather, that is when he saw her. His name was Reginald Hale, 60 years old, but looked 45. The kind of man who spent money on his appearance, the way other men spent money on their cars. Tailored suit, charcoal gray, no tie, top button open, silver at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood power. He had made his billions in real estate, luxury resorts, hotels, developments that swallowed small towns whole and turned them into playgrounds for the wealthy. He had government contracts worth hundreds of millions. He had homes in 4 states and a helicopter that he used the way most people use a car. He crossed the room toward Nadine, the way a man crosses a room when he has already decided what he wants. Unhurried, certain. "You do not look like you belong here," he said. She stiffened. "Is that an insult?" He smiled. "No. It is the best compliment I have given anyone in months. Everyone in this room is performing. You are the only real thing here." He held out his hand. "Reginald Hale." She took it. His hand was smooth. No calluses, no scars, no flour. "And what is your name?" "Nadine." "Just Nadine. Just Nadine." He held her hand a beat longer than necessary. He looked at her left hand. No ring. She had taken it off in the car on the way here. She did not know why she had done it at the time. Now she did. "Are you married, Nadine?" And there it was. The question that would crack her life in half. The moment the ground shifted under everything. She thought about Roscoe. Right now, at this very moment, he was probably home with the girls. Probably sitting on the edge of Violet's bed, reading a story, doing the voices, making her giggle. Probably smelling like bread and wood smoke. Probably exhausted. Probably happy. She thought about her kitchen, the leaking faucet, the broken burner, the pile of bills, the same 3 meals on rotation, because that was all they could afford. She thought about the next 20 years. The same bread, the same town, the same flower on the same face in the same mirror in the same small life. And she made a choice. "No, I am single." 2 words. That is all it took. 2 words, and she erased 12 years of marriage, 5 daughters, a man who would have given her his last heartbeat, and a life that was small, yes, but was held together by love. So strong it got up at 3 in the morning every single day and never once asked for credit. Within a month, Nadine was living 2 lives. She would leave the house in her jeans and flannel, drive 30 minutes to a rest stop, change into clothes she kept in the trunk, clothes she had bought with money Reginald had started giving her, and she would become someone else entirely. She would return hours later, sometimes the next day, smelling like jasmine and champagne and something metallic, like money itself had a scent that clung to your skin. She stopped sitting with the family at dinner. She stopped tucking the girls in at night. She missed Pearl's school play, the one Pearl had rehearsed for 2 months, the one where Pearl stood on stage and searched the audience for her mother's face and did not find it. She stopped brushing Violet's hair before bed, the one ritual that little girl lived for, the 20 minutes each night where it was just the 2 of them and a hairbrush and the sound of Nadine humming. One night, Violet climbed onto Nadine's lap with the hairbrush in her hand. "Mama, can you do my hair?" "Not tonight, Violet, but you always do my hair." I said, "Not tonight. Go ask your sister." Violet looked at the hairbrush in her hand. She looked at her mother's face, which was turned toward the phone screen, lit up with a text message. She climbed down without another word. She walked to Pearl's room, handed her the brush, and said, "Can you do it?" Pearl took the brush and did not ask why. Have you ever watched someone you love become someone you do not recognize? Not in a single dramatic moment, not with a scream or a confession or a slammed door, but slowly. The way light fades from a room so gradually you do not realize it is dark until you cannot see your hand in front of your face. That is what Roscoe was living. Day by day, the woman he married was disappearing, and the person replacing her was a stranger who wore the same face but had none of the warmth behind it. He tried. God knows he tried. He found a receipt in her coat pocket one evening. A restaurant he had never heard of. The total at the bottom made his stomach drop. He held that receipt for a long time, turning it over in his rough hands, flour still under his fingernails. That night, after the girls were asleep, he sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "Nadine, I need to talk to you." She did not look up from her phone. About what? About us. About what is happening. I found a receipt in your coat. A restaurant downtown. $240 for dinner. She looked up then, not with guilt, with irritation. You were going through my things. I was hanging up your coat. It fell out. Nadine, who were you having dinner with? A friend. What friend? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. She stood up, crossed her arms, looked at him with that expression he was beginning to dread, the one that made him feel small, the one that turned his entire existence into something to be pitied. You want to know what I was doing, Roscoe? I was eating a meal I did not have to cook in a restaurant that does not smell like a wood-burning oven. I was sitting in a chair that does not wobble. I was drinking wine that did not come from a box. For one evening, I was not counting how many slices of bread are left before you have to bake more. Is that a crime? He sat there, quiet, his hands folded on the table, hands that had built every piece of furniture in this house, hands that braided 5 little girls' hair every morning, hands that had held her face the night each of their daughters was born and told her she was the most beautiful woman in the world. I just want to know if we are okay, he said. She grabbed her coat and walked toward the door. We have not been okay for a long time, Roscoe. You just did not notice because you were too busy making bread. The door closed behind her. He sat at that table for an hour, in the quiet house, listening to the sound of 5 daughters sleeping upstairs, and he felt the ground beneath his life shifting in a direction he could not stop. The Saturday she left, Roscoe woke at 2 in the morning. An hour earlier than usual. Something in his body knew. Some alarm that had nothing to do with a clock. He lay there in the dark, listening to the house breathe, and every creak and groan of that old farmhouse sounded like a goodbye. He got up. He went to the bakery. He made the bread. His hands moved through the motions the way they had 10,000 times before, but his mind was somewhere else. It was in the bedroom, where Nadine had been sleeping on her side of the bed like the center was a border she would not cross. It was in the hallway, where the girls' school photos hung in mismatched frames. It was in the future, standing at the edge of something he could feel but could not see. He came home at 7. The girls were still asleep. He walked upstairs and found Nadine in the bedroom with a suitcase on the bed. Not their suitcase. A new one. Expensive. She was folding silk blouses he had never seen before, pressing them flat with hands that used to press dough. Where are you going? She did not look at him. Her movements were precise, rehearsed. She had practiced this in her mind so many times that the real version was just a formality. I am leaving, Roscoe. Leaving for where? For a life. A real life. Not this. She gestured at the room. At the quilt her grandmother had sewn by hand. At the dresser Roscoe had built from reclaimed oak. At the window that framed the mountain she used to say she would never leave. What about the girls? She paused, just for a heartbeat. One beat of hesitation that proved she was not completely gone yet, that somewhere under the designer blouses and the jasmine perfume and the lies, there was still a mother who felt the weight of what she was about to do. But one heartbeat is not enough. One heartbeat does not stop a suitcase from being zipped. One heartbeat does not keep a family together. They will be fine. Kids adjust. 6 words. She reduced 5 human beings she had carried in her body, nursed at her breast, rocked to sleep on 1,000 different nights, to 6 words. They will be fine. Kids adjust. As if they were houseplants. As if love was something you could transplant from one pot to another and expect it to grow the same. Roscoe moved to the doorway, not to block her, not with anger. He stood there because his body would not let him step aside. Every part of him, bone and blood and breath, was saying no. Nadine, please, whatever this is, we can fix it. Just tell me what to do and I will do it. I will sell the bakery. I will move. I will do whatever you need. Just do not walk out that door. He was shaking. The flour on his forearms was trembling like snow in a wind. His eyes were red. His voice was breaking apart in his mouth like wet bread. She looked at him. She looked at this man who had never raised his voice to her, never raised his hand, never missed a single day of work, never stopped trying. She looked at him and she said those words. You have got flour on your face, Roscoe. You always have flour on your face. And she stepped around him like he was furniture. She walked down the stairs. The girls had woken up. They had heard the voices, the way children always hear the things you think they are sleeping through. They were scattered across the staircase and the hallway like small witnesses at a trial they did not understand. Pearl was at the top of the stairs, 12 years old. She stood perfectly still, her face unreadable, her eyes taking in everything. She understood, not the details, not the reasons, but the shape of what was happening. She understood that her mother was leaving and was not planning to come back. Ruby was halfway down the stairs, tears already streaming, her small fists clenched at her sides. She grabbed Nadine's arm as she passed. "Mama, please do not go. I will be good. I will be better. I will clean my room every day, and I will not be loud, and I will do whatever you want. Just please do not go." Nadine pulled her arm free. Not roughly. Worse, gently. The way you remove something that does not matter enough to fight over. Opal stood in the hallway, pressed against the wall, white as paper. She did not move. She did not speak. She was already disappearing into herself, already building the walls she would live behind for years. Iris was 6. She did not understand what was happening, but she understood the feeling. She could feel the house breaking. She started crying, not words, just sound. A high, keening wail that came from somewhere ancient and instinctive, the sound a child makes when safety is being ripped away. And Violet, 4 years old, standing at the bottom of the stairs in her pajamas, the ones with the little stars on them, holding a stuffed rabbit in one arm. She reached out with her other hand and grabbed the hem of her mother's dress. "Mama, where are you going? Mama, pick me up. Mama, can you do my hair?" Nadine looked down. She looked at those small fingers wrapped in the fabric of her dress. She looked at her youngest daughter's face, those brown eyes, Roscoe's eyes, looking up at her with trust that had never been broken because it had never been tested. And she pulled her dress free. She walked out the front door. She walked down the gravel driveway toward the black sedan with its engine running. And behind her, one by one, the girls followed. All 5 of them, barefoot on that gravel, sharp stones cutting into their feet, running and stumbling and screaming. "Mama, Mama, come back. Mama, please." Pearl was carrying Violet on her hip, running as fast as she could with the weight of her youngest sister, her face set in a grim line that made her look 40 years old. Ruby was choking on her own sobs, barely able to see through the tears. Opal ran in silence, her bare feet bleeding. Iris tripped, fell, skinned both knees, got up, kept running. Nadine got in the car. She closed the door. The driver, Reginald's driver in Reginald's car from Reginald's world, put the sedan in drive and pulled away. It never slowed down. The car turned onto the county road and disappeared around the bend, and those 5 girls stood in the middle of that gravel road in their pajamas, barefoot and bleeding, watching the place where their mother had been. Roscoe came out onto the porch. He sat down on the broken step, the one he kept meaning to fix. He put his head in his flour-dusted hands, and he wept. Not for himself, for them, for 5 little hearts that had just learned, for the first time, that love could walk away without looking back. I need to pause right here. If this story is hitting you, if you know what it feels like to be the one who gets left behind, to be the one who stays when everything inside you is crumbling, I need you to drop a comment right now. Tell me you are here. Tell me your story, because you are not alone, and I need you to know that. And if you have not already, hit that like button. Not for me, for Roscoe, for every person out there who keeps showing up even when it hurts. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because what this man did with those 5 girls over the next 20 to 5 years, that is the part that changes everything. The first morning without Nadine, Roscoe stood in the bathroom with a comb and 5 heads of hair he did not know how to manage. He had his phone propped against the mirror, a tutorial playing, a woman's voice explaining the steps for a basic 3-strand braid. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from everything. Pearl stood in front of him, patient, watching his reflection in the mirror. "Daddy, you are doing it wrong. You have to cross the right one over the middle first." He tried again. His thick baker's fingers fumbled. The braid came out lopsided. "Is it terrible?" Pearl studied it. "It is the worst braid I have ever seen." He met her eyes in the mirror, and she met his, and something passed between them. Not a smile, something deeper, an agreement. An understanding that from this moment forward, it was the 2 of them holding this family together, and they would figure it out even when they had no idea what they were doing. "Fair enough," he said. "Let me try again." He tried again, and again. By the 3rd attempt, it was passable. By the following week, he could do a decent braid in under 5 minutes. Within a month, he could do French braids. By the end of the first year, Roscoe Linden could braid hair better than most mothers in El Calo, and the other women at the school pickup line stopped offering to help and started asking him for tips. But the hair was the easy part. The hard part was everything else. He burned bread 6 times that first week because he was constantly running between the bakery and the house. He forgot picture day at school. He sent Iris to class with 2 different shoes. He sat through his first PTA meeting as the only father in a room full of mothers, feeling every eye on him, every whispered conversation about what Nadine had done and where she had gone and who she had gone to. But he showed up to every meeting, every recital, every parent-to-teacher conference, every Saturday morning soccer game. He sat in folding chairs too small for his frame and clapped until his hands were raw and cheered so loud his voice gave out by Sunday. And every Saturday, without fail, he baked 1 honey roll, small, golden, glazed with clover honey from a local beekeeper, Nadine's favorite. He would set it on the kitchen windowsill and leave it there until Sunday morning. Then he would throw it away and make a new one the following Saturday. One morning, Violet watched him set the roll on the sill. "Daddy, why do you make that every week if nobody eats it?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "In case she comes home hungry." Violet frowned. "She is not coming home, Daddy." He looked at his youngest daughter, this child who had grabbed the hem of a dress and felt it slip through her fingers, and he said, "Maybe not. But I want her to know the door was never locked. That single honey roll, sitting on that windowsill every Saturday for 25 years, that tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man Roscoe Linden was. He did not love Nadine because she deserved it. He loved her because that is who he was. Love was not a transaction for Roscoe. It was a constitution. It was the law he lived by, regardless of whether anyone else followed it. The years passed the way years do in a small town. Slowly when you were inside them, impossibly fast when you look back. Pearl threw herself into school with a single-mindedness that frightened her teachers. Straight A's, every honor roll, every academic award the school could give. She never dated in high school, not once. When her friends asked why, she would shrug and say she was too busy, but the truth was simpler and sadder. She could not trust anyone not to leave. She had watched her mother walk away from 5 children and a good man, and something in her brain had rewired itself. Love equals departure. Attachment equals pain. So she attached herself to books instead, to grades, to the only thing she could control. She earned a full scholarship to the University of Virginia. She became a doctor, chose pediatrics, so that no child sitting on an exam table would ever feel as helpless as she had felt standing at the top of those stairs, watching her mother walk away. Ruby was the angry one. She got into fights at school with a frequency that kept Roscoe on a first-name basis with the principal. The worst one happened in 7th grade, when a boy named Dalton Gregg stood up in the cafeteria and announced to the entire room, "Ruby Linden's mama ran off because her daddy is a broke loser who makes bread for a living." Ruby did not cry. She stood up, walked across that cafeteria, and hit Dalton Gregg so hard she broke his nose. She got suspended for 2 weeks. Roscoe picked her up from the principal's office, and they sat in the truck in the parking lot for 30 minutes before he spoke. "You cannot hit people, Ruby. He deserved it. Maybe. But you cannot build a life on what people deserve. You build it on what is right." She looked out the window. Her knuckles were bruised. Her eyes were dry. She had inherited her mother's fire, but unlike her mother, she would learn to aim it at something that mattered. "Is it true, Daddy? Did Mama leave because you are a loser?" Roscoe looked at his daughter, 10 years old and already carrying the weight of a question that would take her decades to fully answer. "Your mother left because she wanted something different. That does not make me a loser, and it does not make her evil. It makes us human. People want different things, and sometimes those things do not fit in the same house." He paused. "But Ruby, what I am, what I do, the bread I make and the life I have, that is not failure. That is showing up every single day for the people you love, and there is nothing on this earth that is more than that." Ruby channeled her fire into debate team, then mock trial, then pre-law, then law school. She became a civil rights attorney who fought for families. She represented mothers and fathers in custody cases, and she won more than she lost, because she understood what was at stake better than any textbook could teach. Opal did not speak for 6 months after Nadine left. Not one word. She communicated in nods and gestures and drawings. So many drawings. She drew obsessively, filling sketchbook after sketchbook with the same image in 100 different versions. A road, a car, small figures standing in the dust, getting smaller and smaller. Her art teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Jennings, recognized what she was looking at and called Roscoe in for a meeting. "Mr. Linden, your daughter is processing something enormous through her art. She is extraordinarily talented, but she is also in pain. I think she needs someone to talk to." Roscoe arranged for a counselor 2 towns over. He drove Opal there every Wednesday afternoon for 3 years, sitting in the waiting room with a paperback novel he never made much progress on, because he spent most of the hour staring at the door, wondering if his daughter was okay. Opal started speaking again on a Wednesday. She came out of the counselor's office, got in the truck, looked at Roscoe and said, "Can we get ice cream?" He pulled over at the first place he saw, and they sat in the truck eating strawberry cones, and neither of them said another word, and it was perfect. Opal earned an art scholarship. She opened a gallery in Charlottesville. Her first solo exhibition was titled October Morning, and the centerpiece was a large canvas painting of 5 small figures standing barefoot on a gravel road, watching a car disappear around a bend. The figures were not detailed. They did not have faces. But everyone who looked at that painting felt something they could not name, and the show sold out in 2 days. Iris became a teacher. She came back to Elk Hollow after college, took a job at the elementary school, and never left. When people asked her why she did not want to see the world, she would say, "Someone needs to stay and love the places that love us back." She taught 2nd grade, and she was the kind of teacher who noticed when a child was quiet for too many days, who kept granola bars in her desk for the kids who came to school hungry, who stayed late and arrived early, and never stopped believing that every child in her classroom was worth fighting for. She had inherited her mother's laugh, that full room-filling sound, and she used it like medicine. And Violet, the baby, the one who grabbed the dress. Violet was drawn to the bakery, the way some people are drawn to water. By 7, she was standing on a step stool beside Roscoe, her small hands buried in dough. By 12, she could make every bread on the menu. By 16, she was running the morning shift, arriving at 3 in the morning just like her father, just like his father, keeping that brick oven burning. When Roscoe's hands got too stiff to knead, when the arthritis curled his fingers and made every movement a negotiation with pain, it was Violet who took over. She repainted the sign. It was still a little crooked. She kept the Saturday honey roll tradition going. Every single week. She never missed. "Daddy," she asked him once, "why did you never remarry? You could have found someone." Roscoe was sitting in his chair at the bakery, watching her work, the same chair he had sat in for 40 years. "I have got 5 girls who needed all the love I had. There was nothing left over, and there should not have been. But do you not get lonely?" He smiled. "How can I be lonely? I have got bread to make." She shook her head. "You are impossible." He chuckled. "And you are late on the sourdough." She was not late on the sourdough. He just liked giving her a hard time. It was how they said "I love you," through flour and routine, and the quiet rhythm of a life built on something that mattered. Roscoe never spoke badly about Nadine. Not once in 25 years. When Ruby was going through her angry years, she would rage about her mother, and Roscoe would let her rage until the fire burned down to embers, and then he would say the same thing every time. "Your mother is your mother. Whatever she did to me, that is between her and me. Do not carry my weight, Ruby. You have got enough of your own." And Ruby would cry, not angry tears anymore, just sad ones. And he would hold her until the tears ran out, and then he would make her a sandwich, because that is what Roscoe did. He fed people, even when he was starving himself. And while Roscoe was building a life from sawdust and devotion, Nadine was watching hers collapse. The first few years with Reginald were everything she thought she wanted. The penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the closet full of clothes she had only ever seen in magazines, the restaurants, the travel, the parties where she walked in on his arm and felt, for the first time in her life, like she was someone who mattered, someone worth noticing. But she was not his partner. She was never his partner. She was a decoration, a beautiful object arranged in a beautiful room, expected to smile at the right moments, laugh at the right jokes, and never, ever ask for anything that required him to see her as an equal. The first time she understood this was at a dinner party in his penthouse. She was seated beside him at the head of the table, 20 guests, crystal and silver and candlelight. A woman walked in, young, beautiful, confident. Reginald stood up, crossed the room, kissed this woman on both cheeks, and brought her to the table. He seated her on his other side. He spent the rest of the evening talking to the new woman, laughing with her, touching her arm. Nadine sat 3 feet away and felt herself becoming invisible. That night, in the bedroom, she confronted him. Who was that woman? Reginald loosened his tie without looking at her. A friend. It did not look like a friendship. He turned then, and his eyes were flat, patient, the way a man looks at something he has already categorized as unimportant. Nadine, let me make something clear. You live in my home. You wear my clothes. You eat my food. You exist in my world because I allow it. Do not confuse that with ownership. You do not own me. You never will. She stared at him. The words hit her like cold water. I left my family for you. He shrugged. That was your choice. 3 words. That was your choice. The same casual dismissal she had given her own daughters when they begged her to stay. Kids adjust. That was your choice. The universe has a brutal sense of symmetry sometimes. The years with Reginald degraded slowly, and then all at once, he brought other women home. Openly, without apology. When Nadine protested, when she raised her voice, when she made the mistake of crying in front of him, he responded the way billionaires respond to problems. He delegated. His lawyers sent a letter. 1 page, 1 paragraph. It informed Nadine that her presence in his home was no longer required, that her access to all accounts and credit cards had been terminated, and that she had 48 hours to vacate the premises. 10 years of her life, reduced to legal jargon and a deadline. She left the penthouse with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. The friends from Reginald's world evaporated. Every single one. The women who had laughed with her at parties, who had complimented her dress, who had called her sweetheart and honey, they were gone. They had never been her friends. They were his accessories, same as she had been, and accessories do not stay in touch after they have been returned. She moved to a smaller apartment, then a smaller one, then a room, jobs that did not last because she had no skills that translated to the real world. The money that had never really been hers was gone in months. She got sick. Her lungs first, a stubborn cough that turned into something worse. Then her liver. Medical bills she could not pay stacked up like the ones Roscoe used to stare at on the kitchen counter. And the irony of that would have been funny if it were not so cruel. She spent 3 years in a shelter in Norfolk, sharing a room with strangers, eating meals served on trays, standing in lines for things she used to take for granted. Clean sheets, hot water, someone to talk to. One morning, she caught her reflection in the shelter bathroom mirror. Gray hair, thin and brittle, hollow cheeks, eyes that had lost their restlessness and replaced it with something flat and tired and old. She looked at herself and she saw for the first time the cost of everything she had chosen. Not just what she had gained and lost, but what she had thrown away. 5 girls in pajamas on a gravel road, a man with flour on his face, a honey roll on a windowsill. She needed to go home, but did she still have one? Now, at 61, the same age his father died, Roscoe's heart began to fail. Years of early mornings, physical labor, and grief carried in silence had worn the muscle thin. Violet begged him to slow down. "Daddy, please. Let me handle the bakery. You need to rest." He shook his head. "If I stop, I am done. The bread is what keeps me here." And he kept going. He kept waking at 3. He kept lighting the oven. His hands shook now when he needed, and the loaves were not as even as they used to be, but nobody in Elk Hollow said a word about it. They bought the bread, and they ate it, and they loved the man who made it, even as they watched him fading. His last Saturday, Roscoe woke at 3. He made the bread. He made the honey roll. He set it on the windowsill at the bakery, the way he had done every Saturday for 25 years. Then he sat down in his chair, the same wooden chair his grandfather had built, and he closed his eyes. Violet found him the next morning, sitting in that chair, hands folded in his lap, a faint smile on his face. Flour dusted across his apron like snow, peaceful, as if he had simply decided that the bread was done and it was time to rest. They buried Roscoe Linden on a Wednesday. The entire town came, every single person. The line stretched from the church doors down Main Street and around the corner past the bakery. 5 daughters sat in the front pew, holding each other, holding together, the way they had been holding together since they were little girls in pajamas standing at the end of a gravel road. Reverend Tate's son gave the eulogy. because the old reverend himself had passed years ago. But the young reverend said something that settled over the church like a blanket. Roscoe Linden was not a man who built empires. He built bread. And with that bread, he built a family. And with that family, he built a legacy that will outlast every skyscraper and every fortune and every man who ever thought his worth was measured by the size of his wallet. Roscoe Linden was rich in the only currency that matters. He was rich in showing up. If you believe that the people who stay deserve more recognition than the people who leave, hit that like button right now and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. A parent, a friend, someone who has been holding things together when nobody was watching. Share it because this next part, what happens when Nadine finally comes back, is something you will not forget. 3 years after Roscoe's death, on a Tuesday morning in March, the door to Linden's bakery opened. Violet was behind the counter, wiping flour from the surface the way she did every morning after the rush. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up, expecting Mrs. Patterson, who always came in at 10:15 for her rye loaf, or old Mr. Buford, who liked to sit by the window and eat a roll with his coffee. But it was not a regular. A woman stood in the doorway. Thin, terribly thin. The kind of thin that comes from years of not eating enough, or eating poorly, or both. She wore a coat that had once been expensive but was now threadbare at the elbows, buttons missing, hem unraveling. Her hair was gray and brittle, cut short in a way that suggested practicality rather than style. She leaned on a cane. Her face was lined, deeply, in ways that spoke not just of age, but of consequence. Of years lived hard on the other side of a choice that could not be unchosen. Violet stared. Something about the woman's eyes. Something about the shape of her face, underneath all that time and damage. Something familiar that Violet's brain was reaching for but could not quite grasp, like a word on the tip of your tongue that refuses to form. And then it formed. The room went cold. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. The kind of cold that settles in your bones when the past walks through your front door, wearing a face you spent 25 years trying to forget. Nadine's voice was barely a whisper. Rough, like fabric that had been washed too many times. I know I do not deserve to be here, but I have nowhere else to go. Violet did not move. Her hands were still on the counter. Her body had turned to stone. 25 years. No phone call. No letter. No birthday card. No I am sorry. No I miss you. No how are you. Nothing. And now this woman, this ghost, was standing in the bakery that Roscoe built, in the place where he had died in his chair with flour on his apron, and she was asking for shelter. Violet said nothing for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She opened the group text with her sisters. She typed 4 words. She is here. She is back. Then she put the phone down, came around the counter, pulled out a chair, and set it across from the woman who used to be her mother. Sit down. Nadine sat. She was trembling. Whether from the cold or from fear, or from the weight of 25 years of guilt, it was impossible to tell. Probably all 3. The story came out in fragments. Not a clean narrative, not a rehearsed confession, but broken pieces offered between coughing fits and long silences and tears that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than eyes. Reginald, the penthouse, the diamonds, the slow realization that she was not a partner but a possession, the other women, the lawyers, the letter that erased her, the apartments getting smaller, the jobs that did not last, the illness, the shelter in Norfolk, 3 years of standing in lines and sleeping in rooms with strangers and wondering how a woman who once drank champagne in a penthouse ended up eating donated soup from a styrofoam bowl. I thought he was offering me a life, Nadine said. Her voice cracked. He was offering me a lease, and when the lease was up, I had nothing. No money, no friends, no home, no family. She paused, looked at Violet with eyes that held a question she was terrified to ask. Your father, is he? Violet's face changed. Something flickered across it. Pain, but controlled. A muscle memory of grief that had softened but never disappeared. He is gone, Mama. 3 years now. The sound that came out of Nadine was not crying. It was something deeper and more structural than that. Like a wall that had been holding back decades of pressure finally giving way. A sound that filled the bakery and bounced off the brick walls and the tin ceiling and the old oven that 3 generations of Linden hands had kept burning. She doubled over in the chair, face in her hands, body shaking, and she wept the way people weep when they realize that the thing they threw away cannot be picked up again. Not ever. Not in any universe. Not with any amount of sorry. Violet watched. She did not reach out. She did not comfort. Not because she was cruel, but because comfort would have been a lie. They were not there yet. They might never be. The sisters arrived over the next few hours, one by one, called by Violet's text, each of them making the drive from wherever they were, each of them walking through that bakery door and seeing, for the first time in a quarter century, the woman who had pulled her dress from a 4-year-old's hands and driven away without looking back. Pearl arrived first. She had driven 3 hours from Richmond, still in her white coat from the hospital, stethoscope hanging from her neck. She walked in, saw Nadine, and stopped. She stood there for a long moment, studying this woman the way she studied patients, clinically, carefully, looking for symptoms and causes and prognoses. Then she sat down across from Nadine. She folded her hands on the table. She was quiet for a full minute. Nadine could not meet her eyes. When Pearl finally spoke, her voice was level, controlled, the voice of a woman who had spent her entire adult life learning how to manage chaos with precision. I became a doctor because of what you did, not in spite of it. Because of it. I stood at the top of those stairs and watched you leave, and I felt the most helpless I have ever felt in my life. I was 12 years old, and I could not stop it. I could not fix it. I could not protect my sisters from it. So I decided that I would spend the rest of my life making sure no child ever felt that helpless in front of me. I will make sure you receive medical care. I will ensure you are treated with dignity. You are still my mother, and that word means something to me even if it stopped meaning something to you 25 years ago. But I will not pretend you did not leave. I cannot do that. That would make me a liar, and you turned me into a lot of things, but a liar is not one of them. Her hands were shaking under the table. Nobody could see it, but they were. Ruby arrived next. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded across her chest, jaw tight, eyes hard. She was wearing a suit. She had come from court. She looked at Nadine the way she looked at opposing counsel, with the focused intensity of a woman who had turned pain into purpose and was not about to let anyone undo that work. She did not sit down. Do you remember what I said to you the day you left? I was standing on the stairs. I grabbed your arm. Do you remember what I said? Nadine nodded, barely. I said, I will be good. I will be better. I was 10 years old, and I thought if I could just be good enough, pretty enough, quiet enough, loud enough, something enough, you would stay. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To believe, at 10 years old, that the reason your mother left is because you were not enough. Tears were running down Nadine's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ruby held up her hand. I spent 25 years answering that question. Am the first enough? Every test, every case, every relationship I almost ruined because I could not believe anyone would stay. Every night I lay awake wondering what was so wrong with me, with us, with 5 little girls in pajamas that their own mother could walk away and never look back. She paused. Her jaw trembled, and for just a moment the attorney disappeared and the 10-year-old girl was standing there again. I forgive you. I do. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to put it down. But forgiveness is not the same as restoration, Mama. You do not get to walk back into a life you chose to abandon and pick up where you left off. That is not how this works. That is not how anything works. She turned and walked to the back of the bakery. She stood by the oven, arms still folded, facing the wall, and she breathed. In and out, controlling the fire the way Roscoe had taught her, letting it burn, but not letting it destroy. Opal arrived next. She walked in, carrying a canvas wrapped in brown paper. She did not speak. She did not sit. She unwrapped the painting and set it on the table in front of Nadine. It was a large canvas, oil paint, muted colors. 5 small figures standing on a gravel road, barefoot, pajamas, arms reaching toward a dark shape disappearing around a curve. The figures had no faces. They did not need them. The painting was titled in small letters at the bottom, October Morning. Nadine looked at it. She brought her hand to her mouth. She recognized it instantly, not as art, as memory. Opal looked at her mother for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the bakery without saying a word. She had said everything she needed to say on that canvas, and it was more than most people say in a lifetime. Iris arrived last among the first 4. She came in through the back door, still in her school clothes, chalk dust on her fingers. She had been teaching when the text came in. and she had asked the substitute to cover her class and driven straight to the bakery. She was the only one who sat beside Nadine instead of across from her. She was the only one who took her mother's hand. Her eyes were full of tears, but they were not angry tears. They were the tears of a woman who had spent her whole life carrying other people's pain because she could not bear to see anyone suffer, even someone who had caused her own suffering. You broke something in us, Mama. Something that took years to mend. Some of us are still mending. I do not know if Pearl will ever fully trust anyone. I do not know if Ruby will ever stop fighting. I do not know if Opal will ever come out from behind her paintings. I carry you with me every day. Not just the loss of you, the loss of who I might have been if you had stayed. She squeezed Nadine's hand. But I also carry Daddy. And Daddy taught us that love is not something you do when it is easy. It is something you do when it is the hardest thing in the world. So I am here. I do not know what that means yet, but I am here. And then there was Violet. She had been standing behind the counter through all of it, listening, watching. The youngest, the one who remembered least but felt most. The one whose first memory was the feeling of fabric slipping through her fingers. She came around the counter. She walked slowly, the way Roscoe used to walk when he was carrying something fragile. She knelt in front of Nadine. She looked up into her mother's ruined face, and for a moment she saw something she had not expected. She saw herself. The same brown eyes, Roscoe's eyes, reflecting back from a face that had forgotten how to hope. Violet reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small golden roll. Still warm, glazed with clover honey. She held it in both hands like an offering. Daddy never stopped making your favorite. Every Saturday, one honey roll on the windowsill. For 25 years. I asked him once why he did it. He said, in case she comes home hungry. Nadine's entire body was shaking now. She could not speak. She could barely breathe. He died 3 years ago, Violet continued, her voice steady and quiet. He died in that chair right over there, with flour on his apron and a smile on his face. He never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. But he also never stopped being everything you said he was not. She placed the roll in her mother's hands. Nadine's fingers closed around it like it was the last solid thing in the world. You called him a man with flour on his face. You said it like it was the worst thing you could think of. But that flour fed us. It raised us. It paid for our shoes and our books and our braces and our college applications. That flour held this family together when you did not. When you chose crystal chandeliers over bedtime stories. When you chose a billionaire's penthouse over a baker's love. That flour and those hands and that man, they were the ones who stayed. The bakery was silent. 5 women and the ghost of a life that could have been. Nadine held the bread to her chest the way a child holds a heartbeat. She pressed it against her body as if she could absorb through her skin all the years she had wasted, all the mornings she had missed, all the honey rolls that had sat on that windowsill waiting for a woman who never came. The town gave Nadine a small room above the hardware store. Pearl arranged her medical care. The doctors confirmed what Nadine already knew. The years of neglect and stress and illness had taken their toll. She had time, but not much. The sisters visited. Not every day, not with open arms, but with steady, careful intention. They did not give her back the title of mother. That title, they said, belonged to Roscoe, the man who stayed, the man who braided and baked and burned bread and cried in private so his daughters would never see him fall apart. He was their mother and their father and their foundation and their shelter, and no amount of crawling back could transfer that weight to someone who had chosen to walk away from it. But they gave her something else, something harder than love and rarer than forgiveness. They gave her presents. They let her sit in the bakery on Saturday mornings and watch Violet work. They let her hold her grandchildren, briefly, carefully, with a trust that would take years to build if it could be built at all. They let her exist on the edge of the life she had thrown away, close enough to see what she had missed, far enough to feel the weight of every absent year. The sisters did not punish her. They did not need to. 25 years of consequences had already done that work more thoroughly than any revenge ever could. What they offered was more complex than punishment and harder than welcome. They offered her the truth of what she had lost, and they let that truth do its own work. Nadine lived 4 more years. Quiet years. She helped at the bakery when she was strong enough, folding boxes, wiping tables, small tasks that let her be near the oven that had been the heartbeat of the family she had abandoned. She sat in the back pew at El Colo Baptist, the same church where she had once passed a note to a boy with flour on his hands, and she listened to sermons she no longer had the right to find boring. She wrote letters to each of her daughters. Not excuses, not explanations, not the kind of letters that say I did it because or you have to understand. Just acknowledgments, simple stripped-down sentences that did not ask for anything in return. You deserved a mother who stayed. I am sorry I was not her. You deserved mornings and braids and bedtime stories, and a woman who thought your father was the richest man in the world because he was. I am sorry I could not see what I had until it was ash in my hands. One afternoon near the end, Nadine was sitting in the bakery watching Violet shape dough. She watched those hands, Roscoe's hands, strong and scarred and sure, and she asked a question. Does the bread still taste the same? Violet looked up. She thought about it. Better, because now it is made with memory. Nadine smiled. It was a small smile. Sad, but real. She died on a Tuesday, the same day of the week she had come back. Quiet, in her small room above the hardware store. The last thing she held was a honey roll Violet had brought her that morning. It was still in her hands when they found her, pressed against her heart, golden and small and warm. They buried her in Elk Hollow, next to Roscoe, because despite everything, despite the cruelty and the absence and the 25 years of silence, Roscoe had told Pearl something years before, long before anyone knew Nadine would ever return. Pearl, if she ever comes home, make sure there is room for her beside me. Pearl had stared at him. Daddy, why? After everything she did. Because she is still their mother. And I made a vow. And I'm not the kind of man who breaks one just because someone else did. On Nadine's headstone, the sisters placed no Bible verse, no flowery epitaph, no loving mother because that would have been a lie, no beloved wife because the beloved part was complicated. They chose 5 words. Just 5. He always saved her bread. And every Saturday morning in a small bakery on the corner of Main and Maple in a tiny mountain town in Virginia, Violet Linden still bakes one honey roll and sets it on the windowsill. Not for Nadine, not for Roscoe, for the reminder that love, real love, the kind that rises before dawn and works with scarred hands and smells like flour and firewood and honest sweat, that kind of love does not leave when things get hard. It does not chase shiny things. It does not trade a family for a penthouse or a good man for a rich one. It does not look at 5 daughters in pajamas and decide they are not worth staying for. Real love stays. It needs, and it bakes, and it burns sometimes, but it stays. It wakes up at 3 in the morning and lights the oven and begins again, not because it is easy, but because the people sleeping upstairs are worth every early morning and every late night and every loaf that does not turn out perfect. Real love leaves a honey roll on the windowsill. Not because it expects the person to come back, but because hope is not something you give up on. You set it out, warm and golden, and you let the world decide. Roscoe Linden never had a penthouse. He never wore a suit that cost more than his monthly income. He never drove a car that made anyone's head turn. He had flour on his face. He always had flour on his face. And that flour raised 5 daughters who changed the world. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your life who stayed when it would have been easier to leave, someone who loved you with tired eyes and rough hands and a heart that never quit, I need you to do something right now. Share this video with that person. Tag them in the comments. Send it to them in a message. Let them know that what they did, what they are doing, matters. Because people like Roscoe do not ask for recognition. They just show up, and the least we can do is notice. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind us what truly matters, that challenge us, that make us feel something real, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We are building something here, just like Roscoe, one loaf at a time. My name is Mr. David, and I will see you in the next story. Until then, be the one who stays.